record, and just want to take a couple minutes to look ahead. Everyone is probably aware that we are coming up on the due date for the reflections. So just a sec, let me share my screen. The link for turning those in has been moved. It is right here under week 8, so that's next week. And please make sure you've referred to the assignment guidelines and whatnot for guidance on that. And you should be, I hope, at least, 3 or 4 reflections in by this point. So 5 reflections due right here on week 8. And then we will have a class meeting next week on Tuesday. And just to make you aware, the midterm exam is coming up next week on Thursday. So the asynchronous content for week 8 next week will be your midterm exam. It will be heavily focused on what we have done since the first exam. So it will focus on partner selection, what we're going to talk about today in terms of diversity of marriage. And then next week, we'll talk about LGBTQIA relationships. And so the majority of the exam will focus on that, but it will have a cumulative element in that it will also look back on some of the major content from the first section of the course. Any questions on that upcoming assignment or upcoming midterm? Midterm is happening right before spring break. And then we'll sort of be like on the downhill slope after that. Things start moving really quickly and it'll be summer break before you know it. All right, so today, as I said, we will be talking about diversity of marriage relationships. If you remember from last time, we talked about partner selection. And so now we're going to kind of shift into thinking a little bit more about once we have selected a partner and we have committed to that partnership in the marriage relationship, kind of what functions does that serve for us as an individual, as well as what functions does it serve for society? We're going to look at not only the fact that marriage is kind of obviously a commitment to a partner, but it's also a commitment to the partner's broader family unit, as well as, in a sense, a commitment to the state, because it's a legal binding contract, and that societal function that we're going to talk about sort of relates to that element of commitment to the state. I want to hear your thoughts when we get to the piece about weddings and honeymoons as a rite of passage. We have a lot of sort of societal norms around weddings and rituals and things like that. So we'll talk about those. Talk about some changes that happen after marriage, particularly to the individual. Different types of marriages, different cultural pieces and components to marriage relationships. And then we'll finish up with talking briefly about what sort of characterizes success in a relationship. And while I'm talking, I see your message, Janaea, and also Abby asked if there would be a study guide for the exam. I do not have one created, but when I go through the midterm questions, I'll do that sometime this week. I can probably post something similar to what I did for exam 1. It will just draw your attention to major ideas and themes. So basically just focus on what we've gone through the past couple of weeks and then be familiar with some of those big ticket items. But I'll give you some guidance on that, yes. Okay. So when we talk about motivation for marriage, most people think that marriage relationships is going to give them some sense of fulfillment and result in positive outcomes. These positive outcomes include things like partnership, company, raising a family together. And many couples view marriage as sort of the ultimate expression of love. It has also been documented in research that married couples report higher household incomes than unmarried couples. So there's sort of a fiscal or a monetary benefit to partnership through marriage. About 80% of married women work outside of the home in order to generate a second income that is available to the couple. So those are all kind of individual motivations for marriage. And then when we think about the societal function, basically what marriage does is it binds together two individuals who will probably raise children, socialize them, and essentially leave replacements in society when they die. So there's kind of this procreation, societal responsibility to engage in certain behaviors and practices as a family unit. Now, certainly not all married couples have children, but that is kind of the underlying idea, is that, it leaves behind more people that contribute to society. So when we think about marriage as commitment, I already said, and it's pretty obvious, the person-to-person commitment is that this commitment to the partner and to the relationship was a primary factor associated with marital generosity. And marital generosity includes ideas like small acts of service, forgiveness, attention, respect, kind of those things that we talked about when we talked about love languages. Those could be conceptualized as marital generosity. And generally speaking, this is what people are looking for when they commit to a marriage relationship. We do probably think about this idea of the family to family piece. So married couples, once you are married, you're likely expected to do things like divide your holidays between one family and the other, determine how you're going to share things like vacations, etc. And family members and extended kin often become involved in marriage partnerships in a variety of ways, sometimes through childcare, sometimes through, helping with conflict resolution, sometimes just through shared experiences and company and things like that. But there is an element of family to family commitment with the marriage. And then, as I said, couple to state, a couple cannot arbitrarily end their own marriage because of that legal piece, right? And so as such, there is a state interest in marriage, which is reflective of that societal function that I talked about in terms of protection and care for children that come out of the marriage. And so that's really kind of why the state gets involved. But that's the piece of couple to state, looks at protection and care for children and the legal binding contract that is a marriage. So there are some general ideas on this slide about this concept of marriage as a rite of passage. We think about any sort of rite of passage as an event that marks a transition from one social status to another. So there's a religious civil component. We typically see, traditional artifacts refers to this idea of like, how does it go? Something borrowed, something blue, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, right? There are pieces of kind of family history, those rituals and traditions that are embedded in the wedding ceremony itself. And then weddings are often pricey and public, right? And then the honeymoon is kind of its own other thing. Honeymoons tend to be more personal, but there is a social element of it, especially now with social media, where it's all kind of for public consumption, even private time. And then, the honeymoon really serves this purpose of providing alone time to solidify the new identity of two people who have recently married, and they're now sort of presenting themselves to the world as a couple, as a partnership. So if you guys could just think for a few minutes about your own thoughts and ideas related to ceremonies, rituals, traditions about marriage and the honeymoon as it relates to our society and our culture. What do you think about how big of a deal, if you will, that we make weddings and those ceremonies in our society? What's the value in that? What are your thoughts?
I think that social media has made our wedding ceremonies a lot more like publicized, I guess. Like you hire photographers and everything, and you kind of want everybody to know about the event and what it looked like and stuff like that. So I feel like it's become more of a show for some people rather than like an intimate ceremony.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that social media has made almost everything like that, children's first birthdays. Everyone's trying to do the Pinterest perfect, whatever. And I think that certainly relates to weddings, the ceremonies. I think if we think about media itself, there's kind of a media culture that promotes like big deal weddings. There are TV shows that are completely dedicated to just the dress, right? Not even the ceremony, just the dress. And so it's definitely an industry in our culture. Weddings has become a business, but I think there's a lot about it, as you say, that has kind of shifted from a private ceremony to more of that sort of being in the public view with that ceremony. What are your thoughts on the private ceremony component? What's the purpose and the value of the ceremony itself? And maybe not private, but with like an intimate gathering with family. Why do we do that?
First thing that came to my mind was like the cost.
Yeah. Cost associated with the wedding. In terms of having a big pricey wedding or trying to avoid that?
Like big weddings can get really expensive really fast, but if it's just an example, like on the beach and just have like a couple family members, like that's way less expensive.
Sure. Yeah. So there's a huge cost saving factor if you can limit it to not being such a big event. And I think the value and really kind of the intention really for any ceremony, that we share with like an intimate group of people, it's about making our sort of private commitment to another person public. We're trying to present ourselves and that commitment that we're making to the partner to the public in a certain sense. And then some people go, instead of the small gathering on the beach where they're trying to keep costs down, some people go the complete opposite direction and they have, I don't even know, $100,000 weddings these days, which is insanity in my mind, but to each their own. Melanie, did you have an idea to share?
I feel like also it's like it could easily get lost that it's about a private ceremony, and it could be more about like the entire family, and like at one point making accommodations for everyone. So like that idea gets lost as well.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think, probably like with anything, the more people you bring to the table and the more that you're trying to make accommodations and the bigger the venue and all of that stuff, it just kind of grows and grows into this this big undertaking to plan a wedding. When I got married, I remember I would sit down at the computer and I would like do some research on venues or, anything related to a wedding, like that traditional kind, or it's become traditional, kind of like the big event type of wedding. And I just was like, oh, it was not what I wanted. And I could not wrap my head around like why I was even trying to do it that way. So I called my sister and she was like, well, if that's not what you want, you know, why are you doing it? And I'm like, I really don't know. I feel like I think I felt pressure for like my family of origin to do the wedding that my mom expected me to do. So after I got off the phone with my sister, I thought for a little while, and then I called my mom and I was just like, Mom, I'm not into this. Like, I don't think it's me. And she's like, it's your wedding, do it how you want to. So we ended up doing a wedding moon, which is kind of a newer, I guess, idea, you know, within the last couple decades, but it's that combination of wedding and honeymoon. It was just my husband and I, and we had 2 people who came with us to an island, and we spent 10 days there. The first 3 days were kind of like wedding planning. Then we had the ceremony, and then we were there for a week. And I wouldn't change a thing. It was so low key and it was so easy. And we've been married for almost 10 years and it worked for us. So you certainly don't have to do, you know, the big deal wedding if you don't want to. And then I think, you know, the main thing that I would say is to just be true to yourself, and in whatever route you choose, make sure that it's done for you and for your partner and not for your family members or for, you know, the photo op or whatever. Because at the end of the day, you know, that's what's important. So marriages bring about change in an individual's lives. Some of those are pretty obvious in terms of legal changes related to that contract that you have engaged in with another person. We often see females, you know, changing their last names. But there are other changes that we might not think about, especially in that realm of mental and physical health changes. So one consequence of marriage is the formation of a new identity. I mentioned that in my last slide about kind of the honeymoon. And then when the couple comes back from the honeymoon, they are presenting themselves to society as a couple, a unit, if you will. But that sort of formation of the new identity, and it's related to friendship changes in social gatherings and lots of different things, but it can have an impact on your kind of mental, I don't want to say mental wellness, but it can certainly impact your like identity and how you think about yourself, because now instead of being an individual, you're sort of an individual in a coupled relationship, you know. Other kind of health and mental wellness or changes that have implications for mental wellness and really overall health and well-being are that from the research, partners tend to consume less alcohol. So we see a decline in alcohol use once people have been married. And then we see kind of an uptick in consumption of food. So one of these maybe bodes well for your physical and mental health, and the other perhaps not, I guess, depending on how much alcohol and food you were consuming before you got married. But, you know, we tend to see weight gain as a result of marriage relationships. So that's something to kind of be aware of, but also that shift in social drinking and, you know, going out can be a positive change. So maybe a trade-off there. And then generally speaking, when we think about mental and physical changes, one of the kind of shifts in mental wellness is that we see a general increase in self-esteem and sense of mastery. So if you think back to those frameworks that we talked about, the symbolic interaction framework that helps us understand ourselves and our sort of assets and character traits in relation to another person, that is kind of the idea here. So if we are in a partnership where we realize that someone values us, accepts us, you know, loves us for who we are, essentially that sort of bolsters our sense of self and improves our view of ourselves. So general increase in self-esteem, sense of mastery as a result of a marriage relationship. And then we also see that marriage affects other relationships. So partners usually are spending more time together and less time with friends after they get married. This can be functional in terms of strengthening the marriage, because if you're going to be in partnership with someone, you do need dedicated kind of protected time with that person. But it can also become problematic when we see it develop into like a codependent relationship. So if you are expecting one person to fulfill all your needs or to kind of be everything for you, that's not a healthy approach, right? So you want a balance of some socializing outside of the partnership so that you have other people to depend on, to get your kind of symbolic interaction feedback from. But also it's important to realize that you do have to have that protected time with your partner. There's a quote in the text that says, "Don't forget your friends on the way up because you may need them on the way back down." And that's kind of just like a, an adage, if you will, about this idea of socializing and how it kind of changes as a result of marriage. And then marriage also affects other family relationships. So we see as a result of marriage that people are separating emotionally from their family of origin and kind of taking on these new in-law relationships, which, it just is change in family relationships as a result of marriage. Usually probably for the positive. That's kind of the expected developmental trajectory, right? So other changes that we see after marriage, and these are just kind of global general changes that happen in a person's life. We see this individual notion of kind of doing what I please. It shifts more to the idea of partnership. So there's a bit of a loss of freedom in that. Spouses are more responsible for the needs of another, and sometimes they may grow to resent this. So we take on more responsibility for other people, and that's usually a positive. It helps us kind of grow as a human to take on more responsibility for other people, but it can be a source of resentment in the relationship, especially if that division of labor in the home, in the relationship is not equitable. So if one person feels that they're doing more, that is usually kind of a source of contention in the relationship. We see people spending less time alone. So in a marriage relationship where you're cohabitating, you tend to spend the majority of your time with another person. You're waking up together, eating together, doing a lot of your leisure activities together, and that can have some challenges. It certainly is something that we have to adjust to. We see sexual changes after marriage. There's a really steep drop off in the frequency of sex beginning in the second year of marriage. So there's kind of this like honeymoon phase, if you will, and then sexual action, sexual activity sort of tapers off pretty drastically in that second year. However, married couples still report greater sexual satisfaction than single counterparts. So even with that decline, we still see sexual satisfaction being a result of marriage relationships. In regards to power changes, we typically see that men become less patriarchal and more collaborative in a marriage relationship. So there's kind of a shift in terms of, collaboration with the partner for men, while women in marriage relationships tend to defer less to the man's authority and to challenge the man's authority more often. So there's kind of a stepping down from the power role for men and then a stepping up in power role for women that perhaps brings us to a more equitable playing field overall once we become married. I don't know. But the tendency is for women to kind of gain power in marriage relationships. And then related to that, I am just going to pose kind of a question that are there domains of the relationship, like child rearing, financial management? Are there domains of the relationship or the home or the family life that you think are more gender specific? I think if you think about child rearing, typically that's in terms of gender ideology, more of kind of the woman's role, although we certainly see that being challenged more today. And then I would say, financial management is typically more of the man's realm. But again, that's a stereotype, not necessarily true of every relationship. But those are some of the ideas to think about when you think about power in the marriage. And then number 6, use of technology. This is just something that, we've talked about this thread of technology and how it impacts relationships in a couple of different contexts now. But I think it's important to recognize that today partners have to really consciously commit to spending free time with one another and not free time on their devices. Use of phone, social media, zoning out on the TV, all of that stuff can really contribute to relationship issues, communication issues, even extramarital affairs and things like that that can happen online. It's just a real, it's a really easy place to kind of get off track in your marriage if you're not both on the same page about how you're going to use technology, especially in your free time. So we're going to spend a few minutes now talking about cultural diversity within marriage relationships. We'll start with African-American families who make up about 13% of the US population. African-American families have been stereotyped as being low income, having high birth rates among unmarried mothers, having absentee fathers, marital instability, and being one-parent families. So lots of negative stereotypes there. This view stems from judging and sort of viewing African-American families as a deviation from white family norms. So instead of viewing them with their own historical and sociocultural context and story, we're looking at them through a lens that perhaps is not fair. And there's been a significant amount of research done around this idea. Researchers have developed a theory called mundane extreme environmental stress theory. The acronym for that is MEES. And this is kind of a way that they examine the African-American experience in marriage and family. The idea of mundane refers to chronic and common. Extreme, it impacts the consciousness of the individual. Environmental is about society and surroundings as a source of the outcome, which is stress. So the MEES theory. And some of this research has also suggested that there are a lot of positive qualities for African-American families that are often overlooked because of this lens that we tend to look through in our culture and society. And so we often fail to note that these families are more egalitarian in nature in terms of those power roles between men and women in particular. So we see mothers as kind of strong and empowered, the core of the family. There are empowering pieces of the African-American family experience. Spiritual expression is one of those. And then kind of the pioneering aspect of Black families because of their history of oppression, that these are often overlooked because of the negative stereotypes that they hold in our society. Some other specifics to African-American families. I kind of mentioned this before, but Black families tend to have a sense of pride and a sense of identity that they share around a shared history, group experiences, and the struggles that Black families have experienced. A key fixture in the African-American family is the mother. Black women tend to engage in what we call community mothering, which is partnership with other mothers in the rearing of children. And they often employ firm discipline towards their children. So kind of the idea here is it takes a village. And we really see Black families sort of embodying that idea in terms of how they connect with other mothers and other families to help with child rearing. Children in Black families are socialized towards the cultural entrenchment of racism. So Black families feel a sense of responsibility and, they work with their children to kind of understand racism from a very early age so that children are prepared for when they encounter it in their lives. And then I kind of already alluded to this, but religion is a very important piece of a lot of African-American marriages. Ties to religion are rooted in a shared history of a time when the church provided connection and coping in the face of the oppression of slavery. Kind of a negative outcome is that we see economic oppression and, sort of the intrinsic racism of our society. It sometimes contributes to higher divorce rates if we compare Black families to white families. And then ways that we see extended family having an impact on African-American families are through extended family living. So we often see multi-generational homes in Black families. Extended family might provide childcare and advice and support. Sometimes we can note interfamilial conflict as a way that extended family shows up in African-American families. In general, these families tend to be more connected to their older generations than white families. So the next group that we'll talk about in terms of culture and diversity are Hispanic and Latino families. And these make up about 18% of the US population. And Hispanic or Latino, the language here is referring to immigrants as well as US natives with an ancestry to one or more Spanish-speaking countries. So they could be immigrants or they could be, US natives. But typically we see higher rates of marriage. We see people getting married at younger ages, higher fertility rates, and a prevalence of the female householder among Hispanic and Latino families. And then the three micro family factors that are mentioned refer to male power. So husbands do tend to be the head of the household, but these families are also mother-centric. So mother's involvement with children is a strong influence on marriage and family interactions. And then we see strong family values in terms of respect for the elderly and adherence to the native language in the home. So often Hispanic families exclusively speak Spanish as their home language. The last cultural diversity piece that we will mention is Asian American families. And again, we see a similar notion of extended family being included in the family structure in Asian American families. Sometimes friends also kind of become a part of the family unit for Asian American families. Oftentimes in Asian American families, we see that the parent-child relationship is considered more important than the couple relationship. And that is kind of a striking difference between white families and Asian American families, is the significance of the parent-child relationship. And then there's this idea kind of related to what we talked about in other cultures of filial piety or piety, but this is an extreme respect for and willingness to take care of elderly parents. That's a strong value in Asian American families that might be in contrast to what we see for some white American families. And we will briefly touch on a couple of other types of family diversity. So we've mentioned polyamorous families. Can anyone recall what is a polyamorous family? You can use the chat or unmute. Polyamorous refers to multiple loves, right? So polyamorous families are families with more than one husband or more than one wife. And before I keep going, I think some people may have to hop off the call. Will you guys take just a minute to type your first and last name into the chat? And I'll talk while you record your attendance. So more than one husband, more than one wife. Some basic benefits from a polyamorous relationship or polyamorous family are shared income. There's also increased personal time and attention for children. So really there are more resources available to the family than families with one spouse. We also see parents in polyamorous families emphasizing honesty with their children as a key element to their overall relationship philosophy and their parenting practices. These parents tend to view honesty as a way to create emotional intimacy within their family. And I can imagine that honesty would be kind of a critical component to navigating a relationship with more than what we see, more people than what we see in the traditional family. And then children from poly families, their lives are typically thought to be enriched by the experiences of having multiple loving adults in their home. So we see this idea of multiple role models for children. They're not reliant on just one male or female figure. Some difficulties, though, are that there is this social stigma around polyamory, and polyamorous families tend to experience, social stigma in their interactions with other people. And then the text mentions the idea of teenagers in these type of families using the polyamorous family dynamic as a way to have leverage against their parents, because often these relationships are sort of practiced in secret because of the social stigma and the negative stereotypes. So teenagers may sort of hold that over their parents' head as they get old enough to do so. And then finally, we will talk about military families in terms of family diversity. So there are a few ways that military families tend to be unique from other families. First and foremost, men are often deployed. And so that leaves women in the role of being at home, caring for children. So we see kind of more traditional gender and sex roles in military families. Unexpected deployment can create a sense of uncertainty in the home and family. So that's related to that idea of loss of control. It's really about not knowing when your partner is going to be pulled away from the home because of deployment. Deployment also increases vulnerability to infidelity. So that's kind of an important piece of the military family experience, is the possibility for, or increased possibility for, infidelity. Other military families, though, can become a community of support for families who are separated from their family of origin, probably because of moving around often. But sometimes this support can be an issue. So lack of support from extended family because of separation frequent moving, and then, you know, needing a support network. Those are all kind of hallmarks of the military family. Deployment can also contribute to lower marital satisfaction. There might be other issues at play, like traumatic experiences on the part of the person who is active in the military, post-traumatic stress disorder. All of these things can contribute to lower marital satisfaction. And then we sometimes see that it's difficult for military wives to have their own employment, and they have challenges related to employment because employers understand that, you know, the wife is kind of shouldering the demands of the home, and the children might be moved at any point. So we sort of see that even though the wife may be at home, you know, trying to kind of hold down the fort for the husband, but you know, it is not without challenge that they have a spouse that's deployed. And then the idea of resiliency is also brought out, that despite these challenges that I just described, consistency of work in terms of the military, medical benefits, financial benefits, these often bolster military families in kind of unique ways. So these families are thought to be resilient in the face of their unique challenges. And then the last little bit that we'll discuss is related to marriage quality in general. There's kind of a laundry list in the text related to marriage quality. If you will just take a few minutes and look over this list in particular, is there anything that jumps out at you? So this list describes characteristics that contribute to marital success, which is the quality of the relationship measured in terms of stability and happiness. These ideas are basically related to, you know, time together, communication, the commitment, personal and emotional, the religious and spiritual aspect, elements of trust are very important. Equity in the relationship, flexibility, security, particularly economic security. Marriage and connection rituals, that's that idea of needing to have protected time with your partner, to, you know, share intimate moments, to work on your communication patterns. And then I think it's important to note that realistic expectations are an important part of any marriage relationship. There's a quote from the book, if I can find it. It says, "Marriage is not a love affair. It isn't even a honeymoon. It's a job, a long, hard job at which both partners have to work harder than they've worked at anything in their lives before. If it's a good marriage, it changes and it evolves." And I think that really kind of sums it up. You know, it's there's a lot of good aspects to marriage relationships. There are also a lot of challenges. And then kind of the thing that stays the same is that nothing stays the same. You know, it's a moving target, because we are people and we're all growing and changing. And in a marriage relationship, we're trying to kind of do that in parallel with another person, which can be difficult, but can also be very rewarding. From my own experience, I have found that the most work that I've done to help my marriage relationship has been work on myself as an individual. So coming to know, you know, what do I need in life? What are my own expectations, and kind of how do I temper and manage those? What's my communication style? All of that work on myself has really contributed to having a mostly happy, healthy marriage. And then the last thing that I will leave you with is some longitudinal research that was done on marriage. So the text mentions a study that was conducted over a 20-year period. And so they looked at marital happiness, marriage problems, amount of time spent together, and financial hardships. And through this research, they developed these 5 patterns that they kind of saw emerging over the course of people's relationships. And again, remember, this was over 20 years. And they saw 5 different patterns. So the first was called high and stable. And that's kind of a level 2. So these people were very happy, and that was consistent across the 20-year period. The high stable 1, which is a little bit of a lower level of happiness, a little bit less happy, but still consistently happy over time. And then the third pattern that they saw was what we refer to as a curvilinear pattern. So we saw, and I guess I should do my curve this way, right? So we saw people were happy initially in their marriage relationship. There was a decline over time, but then there was a recovery. So they ended up fairly happy again. And then there were 2, what we would call low patterns. The first was low stable. So these people were not too happy to begin with, and they kind of maintained that across time. And then the low declining refers to couples who were not too happy to begin with, and then that progressively got worse. So obviously, you know, I think positive outcomes would be related to numbers 1 and 2, and probably 3. 3 being indicative of the fact that even though there was a decline in relationship satisfaction or happiness, folks learned how to recover from that and sort of become happy again. Numbers 4 and 5, these relationships, you know, probably not the best outcomes for folks who were not happy in their marriage to begin with, and did not find a way to become happier, and or, you know, got less satisfaction or happiness out of the marriage. And that is marriage diversity in a nutshell. So really quickly, to draw your attention to the asynchronous material, and I've noticed that participation with that has kind of tapered off. So just want to remind you that these reflections and online posts and things are being factored into your attendance and participation grade. For this week on Thursday, there's a website here. It is got lots of different ideas about the idea of marriage. I don't necessarily want you to read everything on this website, but I would like for you to kind of explore these tabs. There are some individual reflections from different authors. There's kind of this idea of marriage through a biological, a personal, a societal, and even an anthropological lens. So looking at marriage across cultures, but kind of do some digging on here. And then I've posed some discussion questions related to marriage on a forum for you to answer and respond to. And actually it's asking you to create a Flipgrid video. So it's just a 3-minute summary of what does marriage mean to you. And I'll try to review all of those and get kind of a synthesized response for the group based on what you guys share there. Okay. Thank you for your time. You can stay on if you have any questions related to reflections or the upcoming midterm. Otherwise, I will see you next week on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.